Everyone in the neighborhood thought Mr. Cole was nothing more than a cold, recluse, and stingy old man. People whispered that he had money, but he never lifted a finger to help anyone. No one knew the truth until one night, when a single mother's son landed in the hospital, and she discovered the bill had already been paid in full by the very man they had all judged. What she learned about her neighbor that day would shock the entire neighborhood. In every neighborhood, behind each closed door, there are stories no one truly knows. This one takes place in a quiet American suburb. The houses here looked nearly identical: white picket fences, well-trimmed lawns, the faint smell of freshly cut grass drifting through the air on Saturday mornings. To an outsider, it was a dream neighborhood. But inside, it was like so many other places. People lived side by side, waved politely when passing on the street, yet kept their lives private, guarded. Among those neighbors was Grace, a single mother in her mid-30s. Grace's life wasn't easy. Her mornings started before sunrise, packing lunches, checking homework, and rushing to get her teenage son, Ethan, off to school before she headed to her 2 part-time jobs. She worked tirelessly just to make ends meet, but no matter how difficult things got, she never let it harden her heart. Grace was the kind of person who believed that kindness didn't need to be grand. It could be as simple as a smile, a helping hand, or listening when someone needed to talk. Her son, Ethan, admired her deeply, even though he didn't always say it out loud. He saw how she stretched every dollar, how she skipped meals sometimes just so he could eat, and how she always managed to stay strong. But right next door was a man who couldn't have been more different, or at least, that's what everyone thought. His name was Mr. Cole. He was in his late 60s, with a face that always seemed fixed in a frown. He didn't attend neighborhood cookouts, never joined the blockwatch meetings, and rarely spoke more than a few words if anyone greeted him. The blinds in his windows stayed closed, the paint on his porch was chipped, and his yard, though never messy, felt cold, like the man himself. The neighborhood had all sorts of stories about him. Some said he was cold-hearted. Others whispered that he was a millionaire who hoarded his wealth, refusing to help anyone. Parents warned their kids not to bother him, and adults rolled their eyes whenever his name came up. But Grace didn't buy into gossip. She noticed things that others ignored. She noticed the way his porch light flickered and yet was never fixed, not because he didn't care, but because maybe he had no one to help him. She noticed the way he sometimes lingered on his porch late at night, staring at the sky with eyes that looked more tired than angry. And she wondered, quietly, if maybe there was more to his story. Still, she never intruded. He seemed like the kind of man who valued his privacy. That is, until one rainy evening. An evening that would change everything. Because on that night, Grace would make one small decision, one simple act of kindness, that would start unraveling a truth the entire neighborhood had gotten wrong about the millionaire next door. It was one of those nights when the rain didn't just fall, it poured. The streets shone under the glow of the streetlights, puddles forming along the sidewalks. Grace had just finished a late shift. She was tired, her shoes damp, her umbrella barely shielding her from the downpour. She just wanted to get home to Ethan. As she turned onto her street, she noticed movement up ahead. Her heart skipped when she saw who it was, Mr. Cole. He was hunched over on the sidewalk, a paper grocery bag in his hands. The bottom had given way, spilling cans and produce across the wet pavement. He bent down slowly, struggling to gather them, his hands trembling. The rain drenched his jacket, his silver hair plastered to his forehead. What shocked Grace wasn't that he was struggling, but that no one was helping him. A car passed by without slowing down. A couple walking under an umbrella across the street noticed, but kept moving, whispering to each other as they glanced at him. Grace didn't hesitate. She rushed forward, setting her own bag down on the wet ground. "Here, let me help you," she said gently, kneeling beside him and grabbing the rolling cans before the water carried them toward the gutter. Mr. Cole stiffened. His voice came out guarded, almost defensive. No, I can manage." But Grace just smiled. "It's no trouble at all." She held her umbrella over him, shielding him from the rain as she helped him collect the rest of his groceries. She could feel how fragile his hands were when she handed the bag back. For the first time, she caught a glimpse of his eyes, soft, tired, not angry like everyone assumed. "You'll catch a cold out here," she said, brushing water off her own sleeve. "Come on, let's get you inside." He looked at her for a long moment before nodding slightly. "Thank you," he whispered, almost like the words were foreign to him. Grace helped him to his porch, then stepped back, preparing to leave. She didn't expect anything in return. She only said, "Take care of yourself, Mr. Cole." That night she thought little of it. To her, it was nothing more than the right thing to do. But inside Mr. Cole's quiet house, he sat by the window long after she left, staring out at the rain, thinking about something he hadn't felt in years. And the next morning, Grace would open her door to a surprise on her porch, one that would mark the beginning of a connection neither of them could have predicted. The morning air was crisp when Grace stepped outside to fetch the paper. But before she could take a step, her eyes fell on something unexpected. On her porch sat a wicker basket. Inside, arranged neatly, were fresh apples, oranges, bananas, and a few pears. Nestled among them was a small folded note. Grace picked it up, curious. It read, "Thank you. See." A smile tugged at her lips. It was from Mr. Cole. That simple gesture was the start of something new. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed more often. Sometimes she'd find fresh bread wrapped in brown paper on her doorstep. Sometimes it was a jar of honey or a small bouquet of wildflowers. Always unsigned, but always with that same initial, C. Then one afternoon, he did something even more surprising. He invited her in for tea. Grace was hesitant at first. She didn't want to intrude, but something in his eyes told her he truly wanted company. The first few visits were quiet. The conversations polite, even stiff. But slowly walls came down. Mr. Cole began asking questions, not the small talk kind, but questions that showed he was listening. He asked about Ethan, about her jobs, about how she managed so much on her own. And little by little, he opened up, too. He told her about his late wife, the love of his life, who had passed away years earlier. He spoke of how, after losing her, he withdrew from the world, convinced that people only pretended to care because of his money. He admitted he had been wrong to assume the worst of everyone, but grief had a way of hardening the heart. Grace listened. Sometimes she added a kind word, sometimes just a silent nod. She realized then that Mr. Cole wasn't cold. He was lonely. Meanwhile, the neighborhood still whispered. Some said Grace was wasting her time. Others claimed Mr. Cole was manipulating her, that he would never change. But Grace ignored the noise. She saw the way his demeanor softened, the way he smiled more often, the way Ethan even began to enjoy his company when invited over for tea. For the first time in years, Mr. Cole seemed to belong again. What Grace didn't know was that soon his true nature, his wealth, his silence, and his heart would all be revealed in a way that would leave her stunned. Because when tragedy struck her son, she would discover the truth about the millionaire next door. One night, Grace woke to the sound of coughing. At first, she thought Ethan had a cold. But when she entered his room, her heart dropped. He was burning with fever, his body shaking, his lips pale. She rushed him to the hospital, barely keeping her hands steady on the wheel. Panic flooded her chest as doctors whisked him away. Hours passed like days in the waiting room. Finally, a doctor approached her. His words felt like a punch. Ethan was stable, but he needed treatment immediately. The cost was staggering. Grace's knees nearly gave out when she saw the number on the bill. She knew there was no way she could afford it. Her voice trembled as she tried to reason with the billing desk. "I don't have this kind of money, but I'll figure something out. Please, just help my son." But before she could say another word, the receptionist looked at her calmly. "Ma'am, the expenses have already been covered." Grace blinked. "What? Covered? By who?" The receptionist glanced at the file. "A Mr. Cole." Her breath caught. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Why would her quiet, distant neighbor do something like this? The next day, Grace went straight to his house. She knocked firmly until he answered. He looked at her, not surprised, almost like he had been expecting her. "Why, Mr. Cole?" she asked, tears in her eyes. "Why would you do that for us?" He sighed, stepping aside to let her in. And there, in the quiet of his living room, he finally told her the truth. Yes, he was a millionaire. He had more money than he could ever spend. But he had spent years hiding it, because every time people found out, they treated him differently. They didn't see him, they saw his wealth. And after losing his wife, he felt invisible, unwanted, unloved. Until Grace. "Your kindness," he said, his voice breaking, "was the first time in years someone cared about me without expecting anything in return. You reminded me of what I thought I'd lost forever, genuine humanity." Grace's tears flowed freely. She realized then that what she had done so naturally, so freely, had changed everything for him. But what happened next was even more powerful. Because the man once known as the cold millionaire was about to become something no one ever expected: family. After that day, things were never the same. Mr. Cole became more than just a neighbor. He became part of Grace and Ethan's family. He showed up for school plays, cheered Ethan on at basketball games, and even taught him how to fish on summer weekends. He filled a role Ethan had missed his entire life, that of a grandfather figure, a steady, loving presence who believed in him. Grace, too, found herself leaning on Mr. Cole, not for his wealth, but for his wisdom, his stories, and the steady comfort of his company. For years, she had carried her burdens alone. Now, she didn't have to. The neighborhood soon noticed the change. They watched as Mr. Cole, once thought of as the cold, stingy millionaire, now walked with a lighter step, greeted others with a smile, and even began giving quietly to those in need. Not through grand gestures that drew attention, but through simple, humble acts that changed lives in silence. When people asked why, he always answered the same way: "Because someone once showed me kindness when no one else would." And Grace never forgot the lesson either, that a single moment, a single act of kindness, had the power to reveal hidden truths, heal old wounds, and create bonds stronger than money could ever buy. The story of the millionaire next door wasn't about wealth at all. It was about something far more valuable. Moral of this story: sometimes the smallest act of kindness is all it takes to open someone's heart, remind them they're not alone, and change the course of a life forever. And that's the thing about kindness: you never know how far one small act can go. Grace didn't help her neighbor because she thought she'd get something in return. She did it because it was the right thing to do. And in the end, her simple kindness uncovered the truth, healed a broken heart, and changed all of their lives forever. So remember, never judge someone by what you hear, because behind every door, there's a story you don't know. And sometimes, all it takes is one act of kindness to bring it to light. If this story touched your heart, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this, and share this video with someone who could use a reminder that kindness is powerful. And remember, we're not just telling stories. We're changing lives.